Will you do a dance?
Yeah.
All right. Dance it up, baby. Woo!
Investigators were consumed with the notion that Kevin, the father, was the killer.
I know that they did what they did to Kevin on purpose. And I know that because they did that, they almost completely ruined our chances of ever knowing what happened to our daughter. And so I hate them for that, because it wasn't a mistake. It was on purpose.
Tell us the truth.
I didn't kill Riley.
Sit your ass down.
You.
I freaked out. I stood up and started pointing in his face, saying, "You know I didn't do this." I took a couple steps, and he's like, "Sit your ass down."
Sit your ass down.
He stole something very important from the world. You know, she's gone. And there's not this amazing girl here anymore, but there's disgusting people like him here.
A 3-year-old girl was sleeping safely in her own home. The next morning, her older brothers shook their father awake and said, "Dad, Riley's gone." The small town of Wilmington, Illinois, immediately came together for a desperate search. But instead of looking for the real perpetrator, investigators quickly turned their suspicion toward the grieving father. What followed was a coerced confession, 8 months in jail, and nearly 6 years of wrongful accusation. Only when the truth finally came to light did everyone understand sometimes justice arrives far too late, and the price paid along the way is heartbreakingly high. In the quiet, close-knit town of Wilmington, Illinois, everyone knew their neighbors. It was the kind of small American community where people waved from their porches, children played freely in front yards, and families looked out for one another. Among them lived Kevin and Melissa Fox, a couple who had been high school sweethearts. They met after a volleyball game when Melissa asked Kevin out on a date. From there, their story unfolded like many young love stories in small towns' high school dances, homecoming, and eventually building a life together. Kevin worked a steady union job as a painter. He was known around town as a hard-working, down-to-earth man. But those who knew him best described him first and foremost as a devoted father. He had 2 children, Tyler, who was 6, and Riley, who had just turned 3. While he loved both of his children deeply, there was something especially tender about his bond with Riley. She was his youngest, his little girl, and everyone could see how much she meant to him. Friends and family often said Riley was a daddy's girl. She loved being carried on her father's shoulders and would light up whenever he walked into the room. Riley herself was remembered as a bright, energetic child. She had perfect dark hair and a round, cheerful face that could brighten any space. She was spunky and full of life, always running around, full of curiosity, yet she could also be sweet and gentle. She loved dressing up like a little princess, having her nails painted, and playing outside. To those who knew her, she was simply a sweetheart, funny, silly, and full of joy. By the summer of 2004, the Fox family seemed to be living a simple, happy life. But everything changed during the weekend of June 5th and 6th. That Saturday, Melissa left early in the morning to take part in a charity walk for breast cancer in Chicago. It was something she had been looking forward to, a chance to spend time with friends while supporting a meaningful cause. Kevin stayed behind in Wilmington with the children. He had plans to attend a concert with his brother Tony that evening. Before heading out, he dropped Tyler and Riley off at their grandmother's house so they could be looked after while he was away. The night grew late. After the concert and a quick bite to eat, Kevin drove back to pick up his children. It was already past midnight when he arrived at his mother-in-law's home. By the time they reached their own house, both kids were tired. The beds weren't freshly made, so Kevin decided it would be easier to let them sleep in the living room. He placed little Riley on the couch and Tyler on the recliner chair nearby. He turned on the television for a while, then eventually went to bed himself sometime after 2 in the morning. The house was quiet. Everything seemed normal. The next morning, Sunday, June 6th, Tyler woke up first. He looked over at the couch where his little sister had been sleeping and realized she was no longer there. Confused, he went to his father's room.
1 a.m. he picks the kids up, brings them home. It's late, so he puts them down in the living room.
Because their beds weren't made, he places Tyler in a chair with an ottoman, and he puts Riley on the couch.
Watched TV, went outside and got my smokes. had a cigarette on the porch.
He remembers looking around and not seeing anyone out on the streets. It was just dead quiet.
And then I went to bed myself.
You went to bed, the kids were sleeping in the living room.
Yes.
And what's the next thing that you remember?
Tyler waking me up and said that Riley was gone.
At 8 a.m., Tyler came into Kevin's room.
He shook my leg and said, "Dad, Riley's gone." And it really didn't sink in at first.
He gets up. He starts looking frantically all over the house. He thinks that she may be hiding somewhere. He looks in closets. He runs outside. And he calls the neighbor's house.
It was a complete mystery. Nobody had any explanation for where she could have gone, where she would be.
So then
Kevin sat up immediately. At first, he thought Riley might be hiding somewhere in the house playing a game, perhaps. He called her name as he searched the living room, checked behind furniture, and looked inside closets. When he couldn't find her, a sense of unease began to grow. He stepped outside and called for her in the yard. Still nothing. Minutes passed. Kevin's worry turned into panic. He checked with a few neighbors, asking if they had seen Riley. No one had. The front door had been left slightly open, something Kevin was certain he had locked the night before. The back door lock had been broken for some time, but he hadn't thought much of it until now. After searching for nearly 40 minutes, Kevin finally picked up the phone and called the Wilmington Police Department.
Yeah, I was wondering if you'd send an officer over here. My name's Kevin Five. I woke up this morning and my daughter's nowhere to be found. How old is she? 3. You're kidding me? No. She cannot find your 3-year-old daughter? No.
What began as a confusing morning quickly turned into every parent's worst nightmare. Within hours, the entire town would come together in a desperate search for the missing little girl. But no one could have imagined how the investigation would soon take a devastating turn, one that would shatter the Fox family and test their faith in the very system meant to protect them. News travels fast in a small town like Wilmington. Within minutes of Kevin's call to the police, word began to spread that 3-year-old Riley Fox was missing. Neighbors who had known the Fox family for years immediately dropped what they were doing. Some grabbed flashlights and jackets, while others called relatives and friends. By mid-morning, dozens of people had already gathered near the Fox home, ready to help in any way they could. What started as a concerned search by a few neighbors quickly grew into a large-scale effort involving hundreds of volunteers. People from all across Wilmington, friends, relatives, church members, and complete strangers joined the search. They spread out across the areas surrounding the house, paying special attention to the nearby woods and the creek that ran through Forsyth Woods. Some searched on foot, carefully checking every bush and clearing. Others rode ATVs, covering larger stretches of land more quickly. Makeshift command posts were set up with tables, tents, and supplies. Volunteers brought water, snacks, and extra flashlights, determined to stay as long as it took. The atmosphere was a mixture of urgency and quiet hope. No one wanted to believe that something terrible had happened to the little girl. Many volunteers kept telling each other that Riley was probably just hiding somewhere or had wandered off and gotten lost. Parents who joined the search held on to the thought that their own children could have been in the same situation, and they searched with extra determination. While the town mobilized on the ground, Melissa Fox was still in Chicago. She had been enjoying the charity walk with her friends when she received the call from Kevin. His voice sounded panicked and unlike anything she had ever heard before. He told her that Riley was missing. Melissa immediately left the event and rushed back home, her heart pounding the entire way. By the time she arrived in Wilmington, the scene outside her house was overwhelming. Dozens of cars lined the street. Volunteers were coming and going, and the air was filled with a sense of collective worry. Melissa stepped out of the car and was met with the sight of her community people she had known for years, working tirelessly to find her daughter. She later recalled how deeply moved she was by their response.
Everybody was so supportive. I mean, I can't thank everyone enough. It was really unbelievable.
We're a town that comes together in happiness and sadness.
Throughout the day, the search continued without pause. Police officers coordinated with volunteers, assigning different sections of the woods and surrounding fields. Search parties moved methodically, calling Riley's name and checking every possible hiding spot. Some volunteers brought their dogs, hoping the animals might pick up a scent. Others focused on the creek area, worried that the little girl might have wandered too close to the water. Despite the growing number of searchers, there were still no clear leads. No one had seen Riley after she went to sleep the night before. There were no immediate signs of forced entry at the house, and no one reported seeing anything unusual in the neighborhood during the early morning hours. The lack of obvious clues only added to the tension. As the hours passed, the mood among the volunteers began to shift. The initial hope that Riley had simply wandered off started to fade, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Still, the people of Wilmington refused to give up. They kept searching, kept hoping, and kept supporting the Fox family in every way they could. For a small town that prided itself on looking after its own, this was more than just a search, it was a community fighting to bring one of its youngest members home safely. By late afternoon, the search had expanded even further. More volunteers arrived, and the coordination between police and civilians became more organized. Yet beneath the surface of determined action, a quiet fear was beginning to take hold. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone understood that, with each passing hour, the chances of finding Riley safe were growing smaller. The search for Riley Fox went on for hours without any sign of the little girl. Volunteers and police officers worked together under the summer sun, spreading out across the areas surrounding the Fox home. They searched the woods, fields, and especially the creek that ran through Forsyth Woods. What began as a hopeful and determined effort in the morning gradually became more serious as the afternoon progressed. Many volunteers started to feel a quiet sense of dread, even though most people still tried to believe that Riley might simply be lost or hiding somewhere. Around 3 p.m., 2 volunteers, a mother and her daughter, were carefully making their way along the edge of the creek. They had been walking through thick brush and tall grass when they noticed something unusual in the water. As they moved closer to take a better look, they realized it was a small child lying face down. It was Riley. She was only wearing a top, and there was duct tape residue visible around her mouth and on her wrists. The 2 women were deeply shaken by the discovery. Police officers who arrived at the scene quickly confirmed that Riley had been attacked and had died from drowning. The news spread rapidly through the search parties. Many volunteers stopped what they were doing. Some began to cry, while others stood in stunned silence. The atmosphere, which had been filled with urgency and hope just hours earlier, was now replaced by grief and shock. What had started as a community effort to bring a missing child home safely had ended in tragedy. Word of the discovery reached Kevin and Melissa shortly after. Both of them were taken to separate police cars and driven to the station for questioning. When they were told that their daughter had been found dead, their world completely fell apart. Kevin and Melissa broke down in overwhelming grief. The pain of losing their 3-year-old child was already devastating, but learning that she had been taken from them in such a cruel and violent way made the sorrow even more unbearable. That same evening, the community organized a vigil to support the Fox family. People who had spent the entire day searching now gathered together to mourn. Candles were lit, and quiet prayers were shared as residents tried to come to terms with what had happened. The same town that had come together with hope earlier that day now stood in sorrow, sharing the family's pain. Melissa later described the moment they received the news.
It was a lot. Like 1 second we were sitting there just like smiling, and then the next minute crying so hard that you couldn't even breathe.
The loss of Riley deeply affected the entire town of Wilmington. In a small community where most people knew one another, the tragedy felt deeply personal. Many residents had joined the search with genuine hope of finding Riley alive, and the sudden, heartbreaking outcome left them struggling to understand how something so terrible could happen in their town. The Fox family, who had been living a quiet and ordinary life just days earlier, was now facing unimaginable grief in front of their entire community. As night fell over Wilmington, the reality of Riley's death began to settle in. The search that had brought so many people together had ended in a way no one had wanted to imagine. Riley was gone, and the town that once felt safe would never be quite the same again. After Riley's body was found, the direction of the investigation changed quickly. Instead of continuing to search for an unknown suspect from outside the home, Will County detectives began focusing their attention on Kevin Fox. From their point of view, there were no clear signs of forced entry into the house. The front door had been found slightly open on the morning Riley disappeared, And although the back door lock had been broken for some time, investigators treated these details as suspicious. To them, the lack of obvious evidence of an intruder suggested that someone inside the home might have been involved. The pressure on the family started almost immediately, just after Riley's funeral, which drew thousands of people from the community. Police approached Melissa and directly asked her if she thought Kevin could have been responsible for their daughter's death. The question came as a shock to Melissa, who strongly rejected the idea. Still, the fact that detectives raised this possibility so soon after the funeral showed where their suspicions were heading. Investigators also expressed a strong interest in speaking with 6-year-old Tyler. They believed that as the first person to notice Riley was missing, he might hold important information. Detectives wanted to interview him in hopes of jogging his memory about what happened that night. While they presented it as a necessary step, the idea of questioning such a young child so soon after losing his sister added another layer of stress for the already grieving family.
Where was Riley? On the couch. How did she get on the couch?
The interviewer continued to ask him about where the father was, where Kevin was, to the point where he became upset. Sobbing, crying. He was visibly shaken.
He pulls the hood of his sweatshirt over his face. He curls up in his chair.
Did you take Riley outside? Did you see Dad carry her out just for a little bit? It's okay if you did. Did you see Dad take her out for just a little bit? Was he carrying her?
168 times he says his father had nothing to do with Riley's disappearance. 168 times he says he didn't see anything, he was asleep. But they won't take no for an answer.
I need to know who took Riley out of the house. Or who did she go with?
As the days and weeks passed, the focus on Kevin became more and more obvious. Police officers began visiting the Fox home more frequently. They asked repeated questions and watched the family closely. Kevin started to feel that he was being treated more like a suspect than a grieving father. He sensed that officers were monitoring his movements and conversations. What made the situation even more difficult was the change in the community's attitude. Whispers and rumors began to spread among some residents. People who had helped search for Riley just days earlier were now quietly questioning whether Kevin might have been involved. For Kevin, this shift was deeply painful. He had spent the days after Riley's death in complete shock and sorrow. Now, instead of receiving support from those around him, he felt isolated and watched. The same community that had come together to search for his daughter was beginning to turn against him, based on suspicion rather than evidence. Kevin later described feeling as though he had suddenly become the main target of the investigation, even though he had done nothing wrong. The pressure continued to build over the following weeks. Detectives kept returning with the same questions, and the lack of progress in finding another suspect only strengthened their focus on Kevin. What had started as a tragic missing child case was slowly turning into a murder investigation aimed at the father who had reported his daughter missing. The trust that Kevin and Melissa once had in the investigation was beginning to break down, and the weight of suspicion was becoming harder to carry with each passing day. After nearly 5 months of mounting pressure and suspicion, Kevin Fox was finally brought in for formal questioning. What followed was one of the most critical and damaging moments in the entire case. On October 26, 2004, Kevin was taken into an interrogation room where he would remain for the next 14 hours. The session was not fully recorded, leaving much of what happened open to dispute later on. From the beginning, the atmosphere was intense. Detectives applied heavy psychological pressure on Kevin. They repeatedly told him that they knew he was responsible for Riley's death. They showed him photographs of his daughter's body and pushed him to explain what had happened. According to Kevin, the detectives suggested that the death might have been an accident, that perhaps he had accidentally hurt Riley and then tried to cover it up. They presented this as the only way he could avoid more serious consequences.
Sit down over there.
Scott told me to sit down, and then they were asking me about the night, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he looked at me and said, "We have reason to believe that you killed Riley."
Tell us the truth.
I didn't. You killed Riley. Sit your ass down. You.
I freaked out. I stood up and started pointing in his face, saying, "You know I didn't do this." I took a couple steps, and he's like, "Sit your ass down."
Sit your ass down.
They asked you, will you take a polygraph test?
They kept on saying that they knew I'd flunked the polygraph test.
And so you said, I'll take it.
It was kind of like they're egging me on.
The test says you killed Riley. $10,000 piece of equipment says you killed your daughter.
I did not kill my
yes,
daughter.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Now, this is a commonly used ruse during police interrogation. Get the suspect to take a lie detector test, then tell them they failed it. As part of that process of breaking them down, of making them feel hopeless.
I was just shocked. I couldn't have failed it.
That's when things really get intense. The police bring Melissa into Kevin.
Kevin failed the test. Means he killed your daughter.
Kevin later described feeling completely trapped during those long hours. He said the pressure was so overwhelming that he felt there was no way out except to go along with what the detectives wanted. In a later interview, he used a powerful image to explain how he felt at the time. You were trapped in a burning room, and there was only one door, and the fire was just flaming around you. It was my only way out. Kevin believed that if he gave the detectives a statement, even one he knew was not true, he could get out of the room, hire a lawyer, and then work to clear his name. He later explained that he never actually believed he had done anything wrong, but the exhaustion, fear, and constant pressure eventually broke him down. After 14 hours, he provided a statement that matched the version the detectives had been suggesting. Shortly after the interrogation ended, Kevin was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He now faced the possibility of the death penalty. The news devastated his family. Melissa and the rest of their relatives were shocked that the man they knew as a loving father was being accused of killing his own child. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the family quickly hired attorney Kathleen Zellner, a well-known defense lawyer with experience in complex criminal cases. Zellner immediately began reviewing the evidence and the circumstances surrounding Kevin's statement. She would later argue strongly that the confession had been coerced and was not reliable. In the days that followed his arrest, Kevin maintained that the statement he gave during the interrogation was not true. He insisted that he had only agreed to it because he felt he had no other choice at the time. The case against him was now built largely on that confession. Even though there was no physical evidence directly linking him to Riley's death, the interrogation marked a turning point in the case. What had started as a missing child investigation had now become a murder case against the victim's own father. Kevin went from being a grieving parent to a man facing the most serious criminal charges possible, all within a matter of hours inside that interrogation room. While Kevin Fox remained in jail, his attorney Kathleen Zellner began working seriously to prove his innocence. She believed that the physical evidence collected from the crime scene had not been properly examined. One of the most important pieces of evidence was a piece of duct tape that had been placed over Riley's mouth. Earlier testing on a saliva sample found on that tape had been inconclusive because of the limitations of the technology available at the time. Zellner requested more advanced DNA testing using newer and more accurate methods. The new tests were sent to a private laboratory with better equipment. When the results finally came back, they delivered a clear answer. The DNA found on the duct tape did not belong to Kevin. He was completely excluded as the source. The scientific evidence directly contradicted the confession Kevin had given months earlier and proved that he could not have been the person responsible for Riley's death. With this new information in hand, prosecutors had no choice but to reconsider the case against him. In June 2005, they publicly admitted that there was now serious doubt about Kevin's guilt. All charges were dropped. After spending 243 days in jail, Kevin was finally released and allowed to return home to his family. The moment brought relief, but it also left the family with mixed emotions. Although Kevin was free, both he and Melissa felt deeply angry about how the investigation had been handled. They believed that detectives had focused on Kevin too quickly and ignored other leads from the very beginning. Melissa later spoke openly about her feelings toward the way the case was handled. I know that they did what they did to Kevin on purpose. They almost completely ruined our chances of ever knowing what happened to our daughter. And so I hate them for that, because it wasn't a mistake. It was on purpose. The family did not stop after Kevin's release. They filed a civil rights lawsuit against the Will County Sheriff's Office and the detectives involved in the investigation. In 2007, A jury ruled in their favor and awarded them damages. Although the final amount was later reduced on appeal, the verdict was an important recognition that serious mistakes had been made during the case. Kevin's exoneration through DNA testing became a major turning point. It not only cleared an innocent man, but also forced authorities to reopen the investigation and search for the real perpetrator. The case showed how powerful scientific evidence can be in correcting wrongful accusations. Without the advanced DNA testing requested by Kathleen Zellner, Kevin might have remained in jail and possibly faced trial for a crime he did not commit. For the Fox family, the victory came at a great cost. They had already lost their daughter, and Kevin had spent many months in jail while being treated as a suspect. The exoneration brought justice for Kevin, but it could never bring Riley back. It also served as a strong reminder of why it is important to rely on solid evidence rather than pressure during criminal investigations. After Kevin Fox was fully exonerated and released from jail, the investigation into Riley's murder was officially reopened. For the first time in many months, detectives had to look beyond Kevin and search for the real person responsible. The case, which had once seemed to be heading toward a conviction, now required a complete shift in direction. With Kevin cleared by DNA evidence, investigators were forced to go back and re-examine leads that had been ignored or overlooked during the early stages of the case. The FBI was brought in to assist the local police. Agents began reviewing the entire investigation from the beginning, paying close attention to physical evidence that had never been properly followed up on. One important clue that resurfaced was a pair of sneakers found near the creek where Riley's body had been discovered. Inside the tongue of one shoe, someone had written the name Ebby. Although this detail had been noted when the shoes were first collected, it had never been seriously investigated. Now, with fresh eyes on the case, this piece of evidence suddenly became significant. As agents continued digging, another important lead came from an unexpected source. A woman who had previously been in a relationship with a man named Scott Eby reached out to investigators. She told them about a strange comment Eby had made when they visited Riley's memorial garden together. His reaction to the case had felt cold and unusual to her, and it had stayed in her mind. When investigators looked into Scott Eby's background, they discovered he had a criminal record that included burglary and other offenses. More importantly, at the time of Riley's disappearance, Ebby had been living only about a mile away from the Fox family home. The pieces began falling into place. Ebby's name written inside the shoes found at the scene, his close proximity to the Fox house, and the tip from his former partner all pointed toward him as a possible suspect. Investigators also revisited another detail from the night Riley disappeared. On that same evening, there had been a burglary at a house directly across the street from the Fox home. Someone had cut through the screen door and entered the residence. This information had been reported at the time, but had never been properly connected to Riley's case. For the Fox family, learning about these new developments brought a complicated mix of emotions. After everything they had endured, the loss of their daughter, the wrongful accusation against Kevin, and the months of public suspicion, they finally saw the investigation moving in what seemed like the right direction. At the same time, they felt frustrated, knowing that important clues, such as the shoes with VB's name, had been available from the very beginning, but had been overlooked. As more information came to light, it became increasingly clear that the real perpetrator may have been living right under the noses of investigators the entire time. Scott Eby, a man with a criminal past who lived nearby, was now the main focus of the reopened investigation. What had once been a case built around the wrong person was slowly being rebuilt around new evidence and new leads. The discovery of these previously ignored clues marked an important turning point. After years of pain and injustice, the investigation was finally heading toward the person who would eventually be identified as Riley's killer. After the new leads pointed strongly towards Scott Eby, investigators moved quickly to bring him in for questioning. Once in custody, Eby eventually confessed to his involvement in Riley's death. He admitted that on the night of June 5, 2004, he had been breaking into homes in the Wilmington area. According to his statement, he first burglarized a house across the street from the Fox family before making his way to their home. Eby told investigators that he entered the Fox house through the back door, which had a broken lock. Once inside, he encountered Riley sleeping in the living room. He then took her from the house and brought her to a nearby area. During his confession, Eby provided several specific details about what happened that night, details that matched evidence investigators had collected from the scene, including information about the shoes found near the creek. DNA evidence played a crucial role in supporting his confession. Testing confirmed that Eby's DNA matched samples found at the scene. Combined with the physical evidence, such as the sneakers bearing his name and the details he provided about how he entered the Fox home, investigators had strong proof linking him to the crime.
I think they should look into obstruction of justice charges because that's exactly what happened here.
He stole something very important from the world. You know, she's gone. And there's not this amazing girl here anymore, but there's disgusting people like him here.
After his arrest and confession, Scott Eby was formally charged. In 2010, he appeared in court and pleaded guilty to 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of predatory criminal sexual assault. By pleading guilty, he avoided a trial, but accepted full responsibility for what he had done. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the Fox family, Eby's confession and guilty plea brought a sense of closure, though it came many years after Riley's death. After enduring the wrongful accusation against Kevin, years of unanswered questions, and public scrutiny, they finally had confirmation of what really happened to their daughter. Melissa Fox later spoke about the importance of standing up for Riley during the legal proceedings, emphasizing that she wanted Eby to understand the impact of his actions. The resolution of the case also highlighted serious failures in the original investigation. Important evidence, such as the shoes with Eby's name written inside, had been available from the very beginning but had been overlooked while investigators focused on Kevin. Eby's confession and the matching evidence finally brought the truth to light and corrected the course of the case. Although justice had been delayed for nearly 6 years, Scott Eby's guilty plea and life sentence without parole ensured that he would spend the rest of his life in prison for what he had done. For the Fox family and the community of Wilmington, it marked the end of a long and painful chapter, even if the pain of losing Riley could never truly be erased. In 2010, after years of investigation and legal proceedings, Scott Eby finally appeared in court to answer for his crimes. Having already pleaded guilty to the charges connected to Riley Fox's murder, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing hearing marked the official conclusion of a case that had lasted nearly 6 years. For the Fox family, this moment was filled with a complicated mix of emotions: relief that the person responsible had finally been held accountable, but also deep sadness over how long it had taken to reach this point. During the hearing, Melissa Fox chose to speak directly to the court. In her statement, she emphasized the importance of standing up for her daughter. She made it clear that she was there not only to witness justice being served, but also to ensure that Eby understood the lasting pain his actions had caused. Her words carried both strength and sorrow. After everything the family had been through losing Riley, watching Kevin be wrongfully accused, and fighting for the truth, Melissa used this opportunity to speak on behalf of her daughter, one final time in a legal setting. The sentencing brought a sense of closure, but it also served as a painful reminder of how delayed justice had been. Nearly 6 years had passed since Riley's death in June 2004. During that time, Kevin Fox had been arrested, charged with first-degree murder, and spent 243 days in jail. The family had faced intense public suspicion and endured the emotional trauma of losing their child while also having to defend Kevin's innocence. Only after advanced DNA testing and a reopened investigation was the truth finally brought to light. For the Fox family, Eby's guilty plea and life sentence also represented an official recognition that Kevin had been completely innocent from the very beginning. After years of being treated as the prime suspect, Kevin finally received formal acknowledgement that he had nothing to do with his daughter's death. While this validation was important, it came far too late, and at a great personal cost. The family had already suffered the devastating loss of Riley and the damage caused by a flawed and misguided investigation. The long delay in reaching justice left many unanswered questions about how the case had been handled in its early stages. Important evidence had been overlooked, and investigators had focused almost entirely on Kevin, while the real perpetrator remained free. The Fox family had been forced to fight on 2 fronts, grieving the loss of their daughter while also working to clear Kevin's name. By the time Eby was sentenced, the emotional and psychological toll on the family had already become permanent. Although Scott Eby would never be free again, His life sentence could not undo the years of suffering the Fox family had endured. It did, however, bring an end to the legal process and confirmed what they had always known, that Kevin was innocent, and that the person truly responsible for Riley's death had finally been brought to justice. In the years after the case was resolved, the lasting effects of the tragedy continued to shape the lives of those involved. The immense pressure, grief, and public scrutiny took a heavy toll on Kevin and Melissa's marriage. After losing their daughter and enduring years of wrongful suspicion against Kevin, the emotional strain eventually became too difficult to overcome. The couple later divorced, marking another painful chapter in an already devastating story. Kevin eventually tried to move forward with his life. He remarried and started a new family. He also relocated to Arkansas, hoping to build a quieter life away from the intense media attention and painful memories connected to Illinois. Despite his efforts to start over, the trauma of losing Riley and being wrongfully imprisoned never completely faded. In March 2023, Kevin Fox passed away at the age of 46 following a head-on car accident in Arkansas. That same year, Scott Eby also died while serving his life sentence in prison. With both Kevin and the man convicted of Riley's murder gone, the case that had once captured widespread attention finally came to a quiet close. For the Fox family, these events represented the final pages of a long and painful journey that had already taken so much from them. Looking back at the entire case, several important lessons emerge. One of the most significant is the critical importance of scientific evidence, especially DNA testing. It was advanced DNA analysis that ultimately proved Kevin's innocence and redirected the investigation toward the real perpetrator. Without this technology, an innocent man might have remained in jail or even been wrongfully convicted. Another key lesson is the danger of bias and tunnel vision in criminal investigations. In the early stages of the case, investigators quickly focused on Kevin based on assumptions rather than concrete evidence. This narrow focus caused them to overlook critical clues, such as the shoes with Scott Eby's name written inside, which had been available from the very beginning but were never properly examined. The case also highlighted the power of persistence and skilled legal representation. Attorney Kathleen Zellner's determination to pursue advanced DNA testing was what ultimately changed the course of the investigation. Her efforts not only freed an innocent man, but also helped ensure that the real killer was finally brought to justice after many years. Ultimately, the story of Riley Fox serves as a powerful reminder of the value of justice and the need for careful, evidence-based investigations in serious criminal cases. It shows how easily things can go wrong when assumptions replace facts, and how devastating the consequences can be for those who are wrongly accused. While justice eventually prevailed, it came far too late, and only after years of unnecessary pain and suffering for the Fox family.